Hey everyone, it's Brandon from Would You Like to Continue? Hope you're doing well, all right? I hope you are doing pretty good. Wouldn't wish anything bad upon anybody, so hoping and praying for the best for those that are listening. And if not, I hope and pray that this episode will be a blessing to you. That this episode would bring some sort of revelation or just be comforting. It doesn't have to be anything super crazy, something supernatural. It could just be a comforting episode, an episode that just helps you get through your day. You may be going through something that may not have an exact solution, right? A quick fix to it, as is life, unfortunately, with certain things. But there's also positives with that. We learn, we grow, we get refined. But seriously, I hope you're having a good day. I hope this episode does you well. It was actually pretty interesting because I'm doing some other stuff. I'm doing some other projects on the side, working on some different things. And my wife asked me, she was like, "Hey, like, did you get to record your episode for this week?" Because I usually have the episodes kind of pre-recorded in advance and edited. And I said, "No, not yet. I actually have a list of episodes that I'm interested in doing, right? A few different solo episodes." And I looked at the list and I was sharing it with her on my notes and processing through with her. And with that, I was just kind of like, I was deciding, like, okay, I'm going to do this one or I'm going to do that one, right? And then a whole new idea just comes out of nowhere. I believe God just gave me this whole new, different idea. And the idea titled Paper Airplanes. Again, so this episode would be called Paper Airplanes. See, I love paper airplanes. There's something about a paper airplane. I feel like if I had to describe my childhood, I would say paper airplane. If I had to use only two words, I don't know if that's one word or two. Don't judge me. I'm not that good at the English language. English. See, you hear that? I didn't even say English. I said English. Oh my goodness. English language. But anyways, yeah, so paper airplanes. And it started getting me thinking. My mind started processing, started going. Our brains are not really like a bookshelf of memory. It's actually like a spider web. Things connect to each other. So anyways, so paper airplanes. When I was a kid, growing up, my parents didn't have much financially. First off, they weren't that versed with finances and how that works and how to navigate through it. And that's not me trying to say in a nicer way that my parents were bad with finances. They weren't horrible because we still had a roof over our head. My dad was a hard worker and he still is a hard worker. And that's just something he just learned. That was something that he knew. Like, if I work hard, my family will be okay. And so my mom, both my father and my mother were some hard workers for sure. And I saw that. I definitely saw that. And as a kid, I was able to smile. I was able to enjoy life despite not having the newest toy or the nicest thing. Like, to be honest, I didn't even care about that. I was very decisive on what I liked versus what I didn't like. And as a child, internet and social media wasn't like popping how it is now. It wasn't really that big of a thing where I'm constantly being told what I want or what I should want. Yeah, there was commercials. So I remember commercials like Soccer Poppers and, the Tamagotchis and all these other early 2000s, late 1990s kind of toys and things. But my fascination, I guess, was more with imagination. I was more intrigued by worlds, by stories, than actual objects or materials. To be honest, these objects and materials were just items that helped me to create these stories, that help bring these things into reality. These toys, these items help bring things into reality, these imaginations that I had. I remember I would watch my Saturday morning cartoons, 4Kids.tv, which used to be called Foxbox. So Foxbox, 4Kids, Kids WB, those shows like Sonic the Hedgehog, Shaolin Showdown, all these little like Western anime kind of stuff, right? That was like kind of like that Japanese block of things. And then my Saturday night cartoons, that was my stuff, man. The Toonami Tom. So Saturday night cartoons, I would have. So this is what it was. I had a whole setup. Okay, I had bins. My family loved plastic bins. And I think part of that was because we moved a lot. So instead of having boxes that you would tear down and all that, we would just have a whole bunch of plastic bins. So my toy box wasn't like those nice Fisher Price cool toy boxes. I think I had one, but most of the time they were just bins, right? I would have some bins that I would take out, flip them upside down, and that was my tournament stadium. That was my tournament stadium. And I had my action figures, my toys, right? And I would create these stories with my toys. I would have them come up against each other. I have them fight, and I would pair them up, right? All my action figures, all my toys, I had them just kind of set up. Power Rangers, G.I. Joes, Dragon Ball Z characters. There was this dude, I think it was Max Steel. Yeah, Max Steel. I had those full grown ones. They're not dolls, they're action figures. And so I had them, and I would watch Dragon Ball Z, and then during a commercial break, I would be continuing my story, my side story to what was happening, or my whole complete different story of events of what was going down. So I would get my toys, my action figures, and I'd have them fight, boom, boom, boom. And I liked the toys that moved more, not the stiff ones that you lift their whole arm up, but the ones that they had joints. They can move the wrists, they had elbows, you can move the knees, right? They can do all that stuff. And the reason why was I could create more articulate and intricate stories. I felt like it can do much more. And that's why I loved Legos, because Legos, you're limited technically by your imagination, obviously by the amount of Legos you have, but more or less your imagination was the cap. And I would create characters out of Legos, create my own action figures with my Legos, create new stories, create environments that my toys would be breaking through. I had these Cat in the Hat books. My mom, not Cat in the Hat, Dr. Seuss, sorry. I had these Dr. Seuss books that my mother got me, or whoever did. I never really read them. I read like a few of them, but I didn't really care for much of them. They looked nice. It was a cool collection. But I used them to make more environments for my toys to break through, to bash through, to knock things over. My whole bedroom became an entire universe. And that is why my favorite movie, one of my favorite movies, is Toy Story. I love Toy Story because that is just how my mind just went. That's how my mind worked. Each character, each toy had a personality. They were alive in my own eyes. And I loved Christmas because not so much of getting more toys. I'm going to be real. I was the kind of kid who went to those places where they were giving away free toys and things. And typically I got clothes for Christmas. I didn't really get that much of something crazy, but I don't remember really being bummed out about it because I loved the fact that we had a Christmas tree. As long as we had a Christmas tree, I was chilling because with my toys and my action figures, I would have them fight around the Christmas tree. It was a whole new environment, whole new level, whole new world, and I was able to create cool, new, awesome stories that I got to have fun and had a blast with, right? And there's just something about a kid's imagination, right? It's just something about how a kid looks, the facial expression, the eye expressions that a kid gives when they look at something that inspires them, when they look at something that attracts them, right? It's like if they're discovering light for the first time and it's magical, it's something mystical and awe-inspiring. And I just miss those days when I was a kid. I miss those moments. I used to get paper and I would draw my own characters, cut them out, and those would be my new toys because I knew we couldn't really afford. I remember as a kid, this is crazy. I remember when I was able to fit in the shopping cart, like in the front, which you put the 2 feet in. I remember getting in there. And I remember looking at my mom, and we would go to Walmart because my mom was always at Walmart, right? Usually to get stuff for food. But occasionally we'll pass by the toy section. And when we passed by the toy section, I would ask her. She said, like, I remember her telling me about this, but I also remember doing it myself. I would point at things that I wanted it. And she says, not now, hon. Like, we don't have enough money, but next time when we do, I promise I'll get you it. And I was okay. I didn't throw a fit. I didn't lose my mind. Nothing. Because those toys just spiced things up. What really made the fun wasn't the toy. It was the mind God blessed me with. It was the imagination, the creativity that the Lord gave me, that He allowed me to be born with. And allowing me to take information from what I've seen and watched and experienced and create my own stories based off that data. And there's times my mom did get me it and it was great, and it worked out. And my playground, my toy box didn't just stay in my house. It also was outside. I would go around and I would climb trees and go at adventures and pretend to be a Super Saiyan and pretend to be a Power Ranger and pretend to be a Naruto character. I even learned like hand signs from Naruto, learning the jutsus, and I make paper shurikens. Oh my gosh, paper shurikens, forget about it. This is why I'm calling this episode Paper Airplanes, because paper, man, you can do so much with a piece of paper. So much. And I remember making these different things, learning the concept of origami. When I moved from Colorado, because my childhood was in Colorado, when I moved from Colorado back to Florida, I lived with my cousin. When I moved from Colorado back to Florida, I lived with my cousins, and they were really into Japan's culture and all that stuff. And there's a lot of things that I got more into because of them. I got more into anime because of them. I got more into just different things. Actually, I got more into the internet because of them too. And so, which made sense because they're like a few years older than me. I got there when I was like fifth grade. They were like in middle school, going into high school, or just starting high school. And so they were into what teens were at the time, right? In the beginning of the internet really blowing up with certain stuff. And so they introduced me to these like things called Gaia Online and all these other worlds where I can just explore. The internet was this whole new, like, you can now enter the universes, the toy boxes that people created. You can now enter it freely, to be honest, and that was so exciting. And that's why I also love video games, because these are other people's imaginations, their minds that you can just step right into. And that you can experience it with the color, with the sound, with the visuals, with all this stuff. And I remember my cousin Ricardo, he would make Ninja Stars. We were so into Naruto, and we would like play pretend, him and my cousin John, and like we were all into that stuff, man. And it was so much fun. It was tough because technically I was homeless. I technically didn't have a home. My family, unfortunately, like I said, we moved around a lot, and there are a lot of negative experiences that I did get to experience growing up. But the pure joy that I had overshadowed, overlight, whatever you want to use, it pushed away those negative thoughts. But as we get older, we have to become adults, right? And we have to put our childish ways behind us. The Bible talks about putting your childish ways behind us, but that's something that we can theologically unpack later. And as you get older, as you grow up, you have to start worrying about other things. And it's not even that you have to, but if you feel as if you have to, you feel the course and the direction. And technically there's certain things you do, like you got to learn to be responsible and mature. But I feel in the process of trying to grasp maturity, we lose the imagination of a child. We lose that mystical, that spiritual. There's something there that we lose in the process of learning how to become more mature. And then we start replicating the surface level things of being an adult, of mature, when not realizing that's not true maturity. Just because you can drive a car doesn't make you mature. Just because you have a job doesn't make you mature. There's certain things that people associate with being an adult, which makes sense, but we try to replicate the surface level rather understanding or knowing the deeper stuff, the character parts, the how to be responsible, taking ownership and responsibility of your own actions and mistakes, right? Consequences just seem to grow as you got older. And now, like, you get to that point where you call yourself a realist, or I'm just being realistic, because you have to be more realistic. You see yourself being as a realist or being more realistic, but when people say that, unfortunately, it feels like they're just being negative. And if I agree, okay, yeah, they are probably being realistic, but they're being realistic on the negative, on what negatively can happen or what negatively is happening, rather than being realistic also on the positive. You need to see both sides. You can't just be worrying all the time. I get it, you may care, but you can't just be worrying every single time, because if there's this phenomenal saying, I don't even know where I heard it, but I'm about it. To worry is to suffer twice. To worry is to suffer twice. Because you are freaking out about these. Your toy box is now conjuring up. Your mind is now conjuring up these worlds, these ideas, these things that won't happen or don't happen. Okay, props to you if what you came up with happens. Now you're worrying twice. You worried because of what could have happened, and then it ended up happening. Now you're worrying again because it's happening. Right? And I'm not saying live life ignorant. That's not what I'm saying. But ask yourself, are you thinking more negative than positive? No, no, no. I'm not asking if you're being realistic. I'm asking, are you thinking more negatively than positively? Are you complaining more that so and so is not doing something, or are you being grateful for what God has done in your life? That you're still alive, that you're still kicking it, that you still have family. As I got older, I learned to resent my father. And that's wild to say because check this out. The same dad I learned to resent was a dad that I looked up to, inspired, and appreciated so much as a kid. When I was a kid, man, my dad, I looked up to him so much because he knew how to swim, and I thought the water was so cool. We lived in this apartment, and across from us was the swimming pool, and we would go downstairs and go to the pool. My dad, he used to be a lifeguard in Puerto Rico, and so I just hearing that was so cool. My dad saved lives at the beaches, like that's really cool stuff. And I looked up to him and I learned how he swam, and I asked him to teach me, and I did the exercises he did, and I would set goals, and I was very achievement oriented, getting from one place to the other without popping up for air, practicing my different strokes, different ways to swim and doing all that stuff. And it was a great time. And I remember at that same apartment, my dad taught me how to make a paper airplane. And it was a very different one. It wasn't the ones you see on cartoons, TVs, or shows. It was a boxy looking one. It was like a square one. And I was so perplexed I'm a kid. And so this is foreign to me. I'm like, how did you make the paper turn into that shape? And what was even wilder? When he threw the paper airplane, it did a flip and it would fly upside down. That was insane. I thought, what in the world is this? And I was fascinated by it. Well, why am I telling you all this? Well, as I got older, I learned to resent my dad, and all those awesome core memories, lovely memories of my dad were getting snuffed out with hurt, with hate, with anger, with sin. It was getting snuffed out and consumed. I was blacking out spiritually. My memories were blacking out. And now my dad was just a guy who just yelled at me when I wasn't doing something right. Well, my dad's Spanish. My dad he's loud. So I was taking it way more personal than what he was trying to do, And then, to be honest, we were going through some tough stuff. I was homeless. My parents have experienced homelessness multiple times, and that really scarred our family. That really negatively affected us. I remember as a kid, I was walking home from school. It was such a long walk, man. I would go through multiple apartment complexes. I went through this forest area, like a nature trail. It was like beware of bears. It was like this cool bridge thing. I would go in Colorado. It was a long trail. And I remember I was coming home and I saw in the dumpsters furniture. And I was like, that looks familiar. And all these people were around it. I noticed the people around it first versus the furniture. And turns out they evicted us because my sister and her son were living with us, and we weren't supposed to have more than X amount of people living in the apartment. But I don't remember the aftermath. I don't remember how I felt. I don't remember the negative of it, because again, the joys of hanging out with my nephew, hanging out with my sister, my mom, my dad, my brother, my family meant so much more. It meant so much more than the negative, bad things that were happening. But as I got older, it seems like now the negative things matter so much more. When I mess up, that matters so much more because I'm a Christian, right? And I have to be like Christ, or I'm an adult and I got to do adult things. It seems like there's so much more weight to my actions, and it's scary. It is frustrating and it is upsetting. And I just want to go back to being a kid where I would play outside, tag with my nephews, where we would go on our adventures, where me and Michael, right, my sister's son, we would sit down on the carpet in her apartment with a box TV playing Crash Bandicoot, The Wrath of Cortex on a PlayStation 2. And we took turns and we had a blast. We didn't need all these special features in the video games that they have nowadays. It was enjoyable. We had such a good time. I remember when I first got introduced to hot fries from my brother-in-law, Aaron. Such a great time. I remember just going from one environment to the next, from going from Colorado to Miami to spend time with my brother. How awesome Miami looked compared to Colorado. It was so different, so thus it felt fascinating. It was thrilling. And then seeing how my brother, he was big, he had muscles, he looked cool, had a nice dog, like cool big dogs. Like as a boy, I looked up to that. Those were my heroes. That was stuff that was like, that is so cool. And I was so happy just to be in the presence of my brother. I was so happy to be in the presence of my family. And for some reason, it seems as you get older, things get darker, things get less entertaining. And you just mindlessly go to the internet or other things to find that source of entertainment or fulfillment. What happened to the paper airplanes? I remember, well, real quick, actually, me and my dad, we are in great standing now. I do not have any resentment towards my father. I love my dad. Yeah, and I realized, like, man, hurt people hurt people. Because my dad's dad was not the best. My father's father wasn't the best guy. And, my dad had his own fair share of things. But I also held my dad to such a high pedestal, not understanding that he was human. And when I was able to understand that, I was able to love him, able to forgive him, and all those core memories I mentioned to you came flooding right back. And I remember the warmth that it felt, where my dad would be sitting down in his, like, those pop-up beach chairs in his room, watching some westerns, right? Sipping on his Coca-Cola. He would put his finger in the cup and move the ice, right? And he'd do the with his mouth and just drink it, just watch. And I would just come next to him, lean my head near him as a kid, and he would just play with my hair and fiddle with my ear. There wasn't anything he needed to say. It was just being in his presence that felt so warmth and so lovely. And in my pursuit of being a better Christian, in being a better human being, in my pursuit of understanding Christianity and God more, I realize that God the Father has that same effect. That same loving effect, that if you're just in his presence, chilling with him, this joy can just burst from within you, can bloom. And I'm grateful for God just stepping in these moments where I felt like man failed. I'm grateful that God has brought me back to those awesome memories to when I was a kid. Not so I want to go back so I can just try to avoid and neglect my issues or where I'm at now, but rather, hey, Brandon, there's something that you're missing that you can have here, that you can bring over, these concepts, these ideas. And that's why I love doing youth ministry the way that I do it. That's why I love doing kids ministry the way I do it. That's why I joke around and make funny noises, and I do these creative projects and ideas, because I still have that toy box of a mind. I still believe in paper airplanes. And I'll end it with this. I used to go to schools before COVID to do sermons, right? I've been invited to schools for Christian clubs and stuff, just to preach, to minister to some teenagers and stuff like that. And I remember I was invited to a school for First Priority, which is a Christian club thing, and I used for the illustration paper airplanes. I used illustrations before, like bow and arrows and other things. I'm a warrior dude, so I always tend to pick some cool illustrations that I can connect with the people, right? And I chose paper airplanes. I got a stack of papers, passed it out to each student, and I said, all right, make a paper airplane. They all started making it. Some of them made it, wasn't working. They undid the folds. They tried making it again. Some of them asked for a new piece of paper because they messed up. And then others, they were like, hey, can you make an airplane for me? It's not working. And they would use the same scrunched up paper that they were struggling to make a paper airplane with. After I had them all do that, I said, all right, we're going to go ahead and we're going to do a contest. We're going to stand on this line and we're going to see who can throw the paper airplane the farthest. Had them all throw their airplanes. Some didn't fly. Some flew really good. Some did some crazy flips. And it was just all types of stuff that happened. I had them get their airplanes and sit back down, and I used that as the illustration. They were the illustration. The paper airplane was the illustration. I shared with them that we are a piece of paper. We are the piece of paper. And God has a purpose and a plan for us. That when he'll fold us into certain things, right? Preparing us, molding us into what he needs us to be, we can soar gracefully. We can do some fun flips. We can do crazy stuff. It will be uniquely designed, but yet simple, right? But unfortunately, some of us, we don't know how to make paper airplanes, and we think it's up to us to make the paper airplane. So we try, and it's not working, and we try, and we still fail and mess up, and now we're all crinkly, and we don't look too good. Some of us, we get some rips and tears. Some of us, we ask, hey, can you tell me how to be a paper airplane? We look to social media. We look to others to tell us how we should live our life, what we should do in this day and age. Apparently, we got to hustle, 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 right? People will be like, I'm 20 and I got my own house. What's your excuse? Like, that is something you should strive for by the age of 20, And we need to understand that who knows best on what kind of paper airplane we need to be folded into. We don't need to look like everyone else's paper airplane. We don't even need to fly like everyone else's paper airplane. We just need to come to the Lord, the Creator, the Master of the universe, right? The Master of the universe, and ask Him, Lord, guide me, teach me, show me. And when you give yourself to the Lord, He will make you into the paper airplane that you need to be, and He will throw you into purpose. You'll fly into your purpose, you'll soar, pace yourself, and it'll be different from someone else's trajectory, right? Similar maybe to some. You may look similar to others, but your flight may be different. But some of you are like, well, I'm too messed up. My paper's too crinkly. There's too much rips and tears. Well, God said, I make all things new. And He will make you into a new paper airplane, a new piece of paper, restore you, restoration, and again, have you soar in your purpose. And that was the sermon. That was the message pretty much that I shared with these students. And the teacher and the students were grateful and inspired. Now every time they saw a piece of paper or they saw an airplane or a paper airplane, there was a spiritual recall memory to what God was trying to share with them in that moment. And that's why, same thing with me. When I see kids, when I see toys, when I see colors and these things of my imagination, Dragon Ball Z, Naruto, whatever, I think back to that lesson that God has shared with me, where God was addressing my hardened heart, that He was able to tear away all this hardness that was starting to get upon my heart and say, hey, no, you're alive. There's a spirit there. There's so much more to you, right? Look back to your childhood. And it's true. How awesome was it for me that I was able to look back and see I was creative. I love creating stories. I used to make my own comics. I was very structured and organized. When I built my stuff with Legos, I couldn't make rainbow color walls. They had to be organized. So it shows, despite my creativity, I had an organization to the way, the strategy to the way I did things. And now, by the grace of God, I have this podcast that God is using. I used to get in trouble for talking in school all the time. And God is now using my gift of speech to preach and minister and to inspire others. I create stories. I have all these stories that I've been working on day in and day out. Like just while I was at maintenance cleaning at a church, I was listening to how to write stories and how to do so I can sharpen this craft, this dream that I had, so that how can I translate my dream into reality? And God has just allowed me to do that. And those who know me more personally know about these stories that I'm talking about, know about these things that I'm creating and working on. And I'm just so grateful because this is all because of God. All of it is because of God. Some of you had a tie to music at such a young age. God probably wants to do some supernatural, miraculous things with that ability and talent or that hunger. Don't limit yourself. Don't limit what God can do in your life. He loves you so much, He gave you free will. So it's up to you to give Him the piece of paper so He can turn you into a purposeful plane. If you're listening, I just want to encourage you. I want you to know that you matter. I hope and pray that this episode blesses you. Think back to those moments, those little things that you used to do as a kid, what you probably used to draw, what you used to do with your toys. I remember I used to make spaceships in my desk and I was trial and error with tape and glue and all that. And things are going to be trial and error. You're going to try some things out. You're going to mess up, but you keep on going. That's part of life. Trial and error. Don't crucify yourself for tripping up. For those of you that are in relationships, hey, who taught you how to be in a relationship? So don't be so hard on yourself. Look towards the right people, towards the right things. Look to the Word. Look to God to teach you how to be in a relationship. And I promise you'll do a lot better and make less mistakes than if you look toward the world. So with that being said, I hope this episode blessed you, and I hope you all make the decision to continue. Love you all. God bless.